Alrighty. Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is the session on how to create and present a scientific poster. My name is Doug Shook. I'm a teaching professor here at Washington University in the Computer Science and Engineering Department. I've been teaching here for 15 years now, which is kind of mind-boggling for me to think about. But it's true. And I've also been the program director for the computer science department's RE program for the last 8 years now, since a year or two before COVID. So also been giving this talk for quite a while, actually. I think Kayla's seen me give this talk at least 3 or 4 times now. Yeah, we have snacks up here at the front. I know a lot of you have already grabbed some. If you want to come up and grab some more, don't worry about interrupting me. You're more than welcome to come grab some more snacks if you need to. Um, let's go ahead and get right into it. I'm going to be asking you all to, give me some feedback and give me your opinions on some things today, starting right up front, actually. So let's talk about what the purpose of communication is, because ultimately that's what our posters are doing. They're communicating. What are they communicating? Primarily information, but we're also trying to hopefully persuade, convince our poster viewers, and also, I mean, maybe not the highest priority, but also to keep them entertained, keep them engaged, keep them interested in what we're talking about. So even though posters are just one form of communication, they are affected by factors that affect all forms of communication. Anybody have some ideas as to what can affect communication? What makes communication effective, or what makes communication not effective? Anybody have any ideas on that one? Think about your own examples. Yeah. So your audience matters a lot. What do they know? What do they not know? Are they experts in the field that you're talking about, or are they complete novices, complete laymen? That's going to have a big effect on what you say and how you say it, how much time you have to spend explaining things. Yeah, any other ideas? Yes. Withholding important information. I don't. Yeah, sure, absolutely. So, the if you can be, there are forms of communication that are less direct than others. I guess maybe how I would think about that, right? As scientists, I feel like generally we tend to be more open. Information wants to be free, at least in my opinion. So, presenting all of the facts, whether good or bad, is kind of our job as scientists, right? To make sure that those facts are presented. But there are sneaky ways, there are less direct ways of communication, and withholding information is certainly one of those ways. Any other ideas? Yes.
Maybe like visualization, either like gestures, displaying the work, or like figures.
Yeah, so I think you're hitting on the method of communication. So I'm communicating to you right now using my voice, right? Using language, using talking, visualization. So posters are very visual formats. They're going to have text, they're going to have graphics. We'll talk about that as we get deeper into the presentation. So that's another form of communication. I'm also using my body. I'm using gestures, right? So body language conveys additional pieces of information. Reading books is different than all of those forms, right? So lots of different ways that we can convey information. There's one other big one I think that's worth talking about, maybe before we move on to the next topic. Think about um, presenting the poster. We're going to be over in Whitaker. What's it going to be like that day? What do you think? What are you expecting? Is it going to be quiet in that room? No, it's going to be loud. There's going to be lots of people, right? Some of them are going to be moving. So your environment matters a lot. Here, I kind of have a captive audience, right? I'm up at the front. You're all looking at me. You're all listening to me. When I say things, the room is generally quiet. That's not going to be true in the poster session. In the poster session, there's going to be lots of people talking about their posters at the same time. There's going to be lots of people moving around. There's going to be lots of background noise that you're going to have to compete with as you're explaining to whatever somebody. You might be explaining your topic to one person, and then somebody else might come up halfway in the middle, and you're gonna have to figure out how to adjust, how to loop that person in halfway in the middle of your little poster presentation. So that environment is much different than a lecture environment, which is much different than you talking one-on-one with one of your friends, right? That's another form of communication. And I think maybe I'll add one more to the list. Communication takes two parties. So I am dispensing information, but the listener has to be able to receive that information as well. Is your audience actively listening? I can tell you from experience, right? We've had plenty of lectures where I can tell, no, this is actively listening. This audience seems to be doing a good job. But even at home, I have a 15-year-old at home, and I can tell very much. Sometimes the words just go in one ear right out the other. So is the person you're trying to communicate with actually trying to listen and hear what you're trying to say? It takes both sides, the communicator and the listener, to actually have effective communication. So let's focus in on posters, because that's what we're here to talk about. That's what you're preparing for. Why? Why are we using posters? Well, posters are a very common form of scientific communication. The other common ways that we communicate in the scientific community, you're also probably familiar with. We have papers, right? So scientific papers are written out usually in long form, published in reputable journals or conferences. You can also see talks about those papers at conferences typically. Posters don't really fit into that category though. Posters are a bit more casual. They're not as formal as a paper. So they don't require the strict formatting that papers do necessarily. And also too, unlike presenting a paper at a conference, kind of like I was mentioning before, your audience is not captive. They can come and go whenever they want to. Typically, your posters are going to be presented just like they are when you do your poster presentation in big hall with lots of other posters. You're not going to be the star of the show, right? You're not going to be the main character. You're going to be one of many. So there are pros and cons to this. The pros, I think, are that you get to attract people who are genuinely interested in what you're talking about. They are going to be walking by and they're going to see your poster and they'll be like, that sounds really cool. I want to learn more about that. So they're kind of self-selecting, right? As opposed to people who are required to take a class, or something like that, who have to be there. You're getting people who are genuinely interested. You also, though, on the kind of con side, you only have a limited amount of time with that person. They might be on their way somewhere else. Even if they aren't and they want to talk to you for an hour, you probably don't want to talk to that person for an hour because you want to talk to other people. You want to talk to lots and lots of people. So the way that posters are typically presented is more to build a community, help find people who are interested in the same topics as you are so that maybe you can collaborate further on your research, build those kinds of connections. It's a great networking opportunity, which is a big part of being successful in the scientific community. Research is never done by yourself. It's done with lots of other people. So posters are one way of getting your information out there and finding other like-minded individuals who want to work with you. So, oh yeah, I kind of already talked about most of this stuff. This is worth mentioning though. If you don't have data that is, publication ready to go into an official paper, posters are a much better format because of their more casual nature. Yeah. All right. So let's talk about what makes an effective poster. Posters are, you can see from the slide, these three things. They are focused. They are communicating one single message. You don't have real estate. Papers, they can be short, but I'm sure you've also seen papers that are pages and pages and pages long. With a paper, you can write as much as you want, include as much detail as you want. With posters, you've got that 36-inch by 48-inch piece of poster, and that's what you get. That is the real estate that you have. So you're very limited on space. You have to be focused. You have to make sure that your message is concise and that you are telling a good story with the limited real estate that you have. Posters are also very visual. Papers and other forms of communication also visual, but the very nature of a poster, unlike a paper that you are reading on your computer or in physical form, posters are pinned up on the wall, designed to be seen by lots of people as they are passing through the poster hall. So you really want them to be as graphic as possible. Graphs, figures, any information, any data that you can display. This is the perfect time to do it. As little text as possible. Some text, yes, going to be necessary, but you really want very few people, I think, are going to take the time to read your entire poster from top to bottom. That's just not the nature of these kinds of sessions. The more text you have, the less likely they're going to be able to read your entire poster from top to bottom because they just don't have the time to do that. They're going to want to see lots of posters, or they're going to want to get to the next session at the conference or wherever the case is. So really focusing on that graphic nature. And then we have to keep the order in mind as well. Your posters are telling a story. So there should be a beginning, a middle, and an end. Here's the problem that we set out to try and solve or observe. Here's the way that we set up our experiments. And then here's what we learned. Here's our data. Here's our conclusions. So all of that is very, very important. This is a great link. I'm not going to pull it up right now, but this is a great link for you to take a look at on your own time that has lots of videos about these particular topics and dives into a lot more detail than I think I'm going to have time to do today. So an effective poster, it plays multiple roles. It is trying to dispense information. It's also trying to start conversations. It's also trying to get your viewers to ask questions. You're also advertising you're advertising your work, which is an extension of your. So make sure that it represents you. Make sure that it's conveying your work in an accurate way. Definitely want to avoid. Well, these are kind of the contrasts of the previous slide, right? Lots of tiny text crammed onto a poster. I promise you, I'm not going to stop and read it. I promise you, I'm not. It's immediately intimidating. I don't think I'm alone in feeling that way. Lots of big graphics. Yes, that's going to catch my eye. That's going to make me want to stop, learn more about what you're talking about. Visual grammar. Yeah, kind of just repeating more of the same. Definitely want to show people as much as possible instead of telling them. We'll take a look at some examples of posters. I've actually got a few examples of posters that we're going to critique a bit. And some of them we'll see some examples of what's called visual chaos, where there's just not a good flow, or the data is not presented in an effective way. We want to guide our viewer. There's a natural way that we read things. We like to start at the top left and move through, left to right, top to bottom, kind of like a book. So we don't want to go against the grain. We don't want to try and force our readers to view our poster in an unnatural way. And make sure that your stuff is readable from far away. Again, people aren't going to be right up on your poster reading the text. You're going to be standing right there talking to them while they're looking at it. So they're going to be at least a few feet away. And you really want it to be viewable from even farther away, because you want to catch their eye as they're going through that poster hall. You want to get their attention. You want to make them stop. If your text and your figures are too small, they're just going to gloss over it. There's not going to be anything that's going to catch their eye, make them want to stop and talk to you about your research, your poster. This is a great example. I'm kind of going through this phase right now with my oldest daughter is entering third grade. Classic science fair experiments, right? And this is sort of the child version of presenting scientific data. But this is not what we're doing here, right? What we're doing here is more than just taking pieces of paper and gluing them on a board. I want to reiterate that we are telling a story. So maybe some of you have given science fair presentations like this in the past. I think that's great. I think it's a great way to get kids involved in science, but this is the grown-up version. This is the adult version. We are telling a story with our posters. So let's take a look at some examples. Let's take a look at, I've got, I think, 3 examples of posters, and for each one, I'm going to give you maybe 2 or 3 minutes to just kind of look at it. I don't expect you to, of course, read the whole thing in that time, but I want you to think not so much about the content, but more about maybe a little bit about the content, but more about the design, more about how it's laid out, the way that the information that it contains, and how that information is presented. So after each one, we'll talk about these questions. We'll talk about who the audience is. We'll talk about, some of the good design characteristics, maybe some of the less desirable design characteristics. And we're going to start with this one. Here is our first example of a poster. I'm going to shut my mouth for a couple minutes, let you look at this. Think about what you like. Think about what you don't like. All right. Got a couple minutes to think about this one. Let's start with the good things. What are the things that we like about this? What are the positive aspects of this poster design? Yeah, in the back. Beautiful. That's my favorite too. The manatee is perfect. Is it conveying a ton of information? Not necessarily, but it's an eye catcher. And anybody who likes manatees, which should be all of us, right, is going to want to stop and talk to you about this poster after they see that picture of manatee. Does a great job of getting people's attention. So I love the manatee as well. What else do we like about this? Yeah, the middle section, okay. I would expand that out to be, you talk about the entire flow. You can see that this is telling a story, right? You've got the introduction, the objectives, the methods, the results, and then finally a discussion section. You could maybe argue that I don't know if all of those sections are extremely necessary. Even if you cut one of them, that would allow you to devote some more space to the other ones, which could be an advantage. But there's definitely a flow here, and that middle section does a great job of contributing to the flow. Yes. Any other things that we like about this poster? I love the title. I actually think the title is very good. If you can phrase your title as a question, absolutely going to make people think and want to stop and say, huh, what's the answer to that question? Do these people have the answer to that question? I want to know what the answer to that question is. Will manatees exist in 2100? God, I hope so. But like, what is the risk here? You know, is that really a realistic problem? Are manatees really that much in danger? Like, I want to know more. I want to make sure that the manatees are going to be around. So that title's nice and big. I think after the manatee, which is clearly an attention grabber, that title is probably the second biggest attention grabber on this poster, as it should be. As it should be. Your title should be able to draw people in, and asking a question is a great way to do that, as opposed to just simply stating, this is the research that I did on the Barnes-Sut algorithm or whatever the case may be. If you can phrase it as a question, that's going to be a much bigger grab. What are some ways that this poster can improve? Anybody have any constructive criticism? I know it's a little hard to critique based on a PowerPoint slide as opposed to actually physically seeing the poster, but I still think there are some areas of improvement. I think there's a lot of, yeah, sorry. Yes, you read my mind. There's a lot of text. There's a lot of text. I think if we can try and cut text out, in particular, this section, kind of question if it really needs to be there, because there's going to be a person presenting this poster. So why do I need to state the discussion in the poster if I am there doing the discussion? Hopefully, I or the presenter of this poster will have these discussion questions in their brain preloaded, right? So that as people come by and they want to know more, then we can discussion questions. I don't know that they necessarily need to be explicitly spelled out, so we could get rid of all of that text, which again kind of gives us more room to for the other sections. Yes.
Should
Yeah.
this case eliminate the discussion section completely, or would you just really cut it down to a few main points and give more?
That's great. Yeah, you could, I think, as a middle ground, you could keep the bullet parts, right, and get rid of the additional details. I think that would be a good compromise. Absolutely. Yeah. Uh, as you can already probably kind of tell, it's subjective, right? So one person's opinion is not necessarily going to match everyone's opinions. There's always going to be multiple ways of doing things. Yeah. Any other improvements that we think we could suggest? Yes. The graphs are pretty small, and honestly, these ones are kind of samey, right? Like these two in particular. What even is the difference? The one below it looks a little bit different, but still very much similar to these ones, which, these two also look very similar. So why are we wasting real estate, possibly repeating, the same-ish graph multiple times? Yes. That is also, I think, a little disruptive to the flow. Yeah, I think that's a great observation. It's a little disruptive to the flow. Um, this guy right here, I love matrix algebra. Like, don't get me wrong, I think linear algebra is great, but this is a little bit intimidating to see on this poster, I feel like. If you have 5 minutes to talk to somebody, are you really going to want to talk about eigenvalues and sparse matrices and stuff? Probably not, right? Um, Probably not the main goal. So I don't doubt that this is important. I think if you were publishing a paper, absolutely this would be appropriate to put in. But if you're putting it on a poster, maybe not. Maybe we could, again, save space here by describing the methods in text or even in person. And if somebody comes by who really wants to dig into the details, well then, okay, I'm ready to talk to you about those, right? I can tell you about those in person. Great. I think we've done a good job on this one. Anybody have any comments before we move on to a next round? All right, let's take a look at another one. Here's our second one. Just like before, I'm going to give you a few minutes. Okay, let's start with the positives. Who has some kind things, some nice things about this poster they'd like to point out? That bad, huh? I think there are some positive things here. The title, I think, is definitely eye-catching, right? It's the biggest thing on the poster, as it should be. You have no doubts about what this poster is about, just from reading that dark blue box, right? It's about a bottle cap removal machine, right? Just as it says. I like this. I like these graphics over here. They're nice. And even these graphics here, I think, do a good job of kind of conveying the problems that they were dealing with. Any other positives? So I think maybe you've already kind of figured out this is sort of an example that has some issues. What are some of those issues? Yeah.
6 RPM. And then it says do 48 volts. Those two things seem to direct.
Hmm. Well, maybe not. Is it a parallel bottle cap removal machine? Is it doing more than one bottle at once? I guess the diagram makes it look like it is only doing one bottle at a time. How many rotations does it take for a single bottle? How fast can you replace a bottle on the machine? These are all questions that I don't think are specifically answered, but I agree with your point in general that these graphics, I think, maybe aren't conveying enough. They're nice, they're pleasing to look at. They aren't charts. They aren't displaying data in a platform or a visual form that's really going to illustrate to me how this works in the detail that I might care about or you might care about. Yeah. What else? Yes.
Like, if you have the design assumptions, you can integrate some graphics there that are going to tell the story rather than having all those bullet points that nobody's going to send.
Yes. And you might be sensing a theme here because I agree with you. Too much text is a very, very easy problem to run into with posters. And I kind of get why. It's very easy for us to write down all kinds of stuff about our research because we know about it, right? We know all the little details. Very easy for us to crank out text about it. But remembering that this is a visual format and that text is not necessarily the best way to convey things in this particular format is very, very important. Please do your best to try not to fall into that trap of just putting layers and layers of text. I think almost all the examples that I'm going to show you are going to fall into that category, in my opinion. Yeah. Anything else? Yes.
Yeah, I got confused when I saw these conventional subtitles. Oh, do I want to find results? Oh, it's actually performance.
Mhm.
So it's
The titles? Yeah, absolutely. And the way that it's laid out too also feels a little bit confusing to me. It does follow the same kind of three-column format that the previous one did, but by putting these into their own separate box, I feel like it sort of interrupts the flow of that three-column format, which is a pretty standard format for these kinds of posters to have those three columns on the poster. But I agree with you as well. These titles, I think, are good. They're nice and big. I like that part. But just making sure that they're clearly conveying sections are. Yep. Any other critiques we'd like to offer about this one before we move on to the next poster? Got one more after this. Okay, let's take a look at one more, and then we'll move on. Is that an audible gasp? I heard. All right, I know it might seem difficult because there are some pretty obvious problems with this poster, but can we start by talking about some things that are done well? Did anybody find something that they consider to be a good choice? Try to be an optimistic person. It's tough. I think, these have been in kind of decreasing levels of quality, in my opinion, in terms of the way these posters are laid out. The flow, I would argue, is still good. If I'm trying to find a positive, right? The flow is still good. I start with the background, move on to methods, then results, section, conclusion. Are there too many sections? Yeah, I kind of think so, but it still has a flow. I'm not sure that I have anything else actually that I could say kind about this. Yes. Yeah, sure. I think that's important. I didn't actually show any examples of this on the previous posters, but making sure the text contrasts well with the background, black on white is always going to be a safe choice, right? If you try and get too fancy with your design, make things difficult to see, difficult to read. So yes, I think that's a nice thing to say about this. Should we talk about the elephant in the room, though? As regards to this poster, I think maybe one of the bigger issues it's tall, right? And that's just kind of awkward looking. Please don't do this. Please keep your poster wider than it is tall, like these prior two examples are. As humans, our vision is actually widescreen, right? It actually is wider than it is tall. So presenting your information in this way is going to be jarring. I mean, you saw it when I switched the slide, right? It's kind of like, oh, why am I looking at it like this? So please use the wider format. That 3 columns, as we've seen on the prior 2 examples, kind of standard. You might think you're being more efficient in use space with this 2-column format, but the trade-off in the awkwardness of the design is not worth it. I promise you. What else? What other issues does this poster have? Yeah.
Especially and I mean, I'm not entirely sure what the purpose the figure in the background section. And I don't know if you could include that somewhere differently. But I feel like, by adding those to the both background and methods, you're kind of drawing away attention from the actual conclusions that result.
I agree with you. The figures are way too small. One concrete way to think about this, the text that is on your figure should be at least as big as the text on the rest of your poster. And I don't think that's true for any of these figures that are on this particular poster. So, if you think this text is hard to read, which I honestly kind of think it is a little bit hard to read, the text on the figures can be even harder to read. Also, just not an efficient use of space when there's just gaps here. And kind of those 3, as you mentioned, are all crammed together. So yeah, and then we do the nice flip flop on the background one where we've got figures on the right side and then switch to figures on the left side. Kind of a jarring transition there as well. So yeah, this is clearly the example of what to avoid for the most part when you're making your posters. I want to reiterate though, the biggest thing to avoid from this example, please do not make your posters vertical. It has happened. Not very often, but it has definitely happened. You're going to feel weird if you show up with a vertical poster and everybody else is horizontal. I promise you, you do not want to be that person. So please don't be that person. Please make your posters widescreen. Please make them wide. All right, great. So let's move on. Here is an experimental sort of design of a poster. This was proposed a few years back, actually. It's been around for a while. It's radically different than the posters that I showed to you. And it does that for a reason, right? It puts the premise right there, right smack in the middle. They're really playing on this idea of a poster's job is to attract people. And the best way to attract people is to put things, the most important thing, right smack in the middle. That's what people are going to be drawn to first. And then all of the other information, you can see the flow is still there in terms of here's the intro, here's what we did, here's our results, but that's all done on the periphery, on the sides. The idea here being that, okay, once I attract them with the big important bit in the middle, and they come over to me, that's when I can show them this fun stuff on the side and get really down into the nitty-gritty, down into the details. This was proposed by someone who I think is more of a design expert, maybe not necessarily as heavy into the scientific part of things, has not been very widely adopted. I think there's multiple reasons for that. One reason just being that this has been the traditional format for so long, and nobody wants to kind of be the one who stands out and tries the new thing and tries to do it differently. It also, you can see all of the space that is not used. I think that's a very valid critique of this poster design. You know, we have limited real estate and we're choosing not to use a big old chunk of it solely for the purposes of design. I'm not a design expert. Design experts might say that that's a perfectly reasonable thing to do, but if I'm trying to convey as much information as possible, I want to try and use as much of that space, as much of that real estate as I can. Um, you know, if you're thinking about taking a big swing, this might be one way to do it. I have seen some posters presented this way at conferences. It's not common, but it is maybe starting to catch on a little bit. Um, the more common format is going to be, as I mentioned, kind of this 3-column format that we've seen on these first 2 posters. But yeah, just something that's kind of interesting to think about from a design perspective. And if you want to learn more, take a look at that YouTube video. It's a really interesting video to watch. All right. So yeah, just to kind of put everything all together, lots and lots of visual displays. The more graphics, the more plots that you have, the more meaningful plots that you have, the better. We want to, don't focus on the methods too much. If somebody wants to know more about how you did something, they can, that's what you're there for. So you don't necessarily think about what you can say as you're designing the poster. I think it's a very important thing to keep in mind. If I'm going to be there explaining things, then I don't necessarily need to put everything on the poster. But you do want to make sure that your key results are on the poster. Hopefully big and prominent, right? You want people to walk away with, oh yeah, they were able to successfully do XYZ. That's what you want them to walk away and tell all their friends about if they're talking to them about your poster later. So make sure that you have that. And also make sure to talk to them about their own interests, get their contact info, make sure that you can make some contacts, expand your network, find some more research collaborators for future research. Don't cram stuff in. Use lots of white space, not lots, but enough to make things balanced, enough to make things easy to read. And as we saw on the more successful posters, those headers are very important. I think that was mentioned a couple of times. Using columns to go from top to bottom, right, is a very natural way that humans like to read things. Deviating from that format, I didn't show you any examples, right? But making, ones that go across is going to be a little bit confusing for a lot of people. Using that 3-column format is popular for a reason, because humans just naturally like to view things that way. All right, let's talk about some more specific formatting details. I said this, I don't know how many times, but there's a reason. Try and minimize the amount of text that you can. Bullet points are much better than paragraphs. So if you can make it concise, that's going to be much better than a paragraph of text. You really want your blocks to be short, and you want that text to be big. So here are some suggestions of minimum text sizes in terms of font sizes that you can use. But don't just do it this way because that's what it says on the slide. You actually need to look at it, right? You actually need to look at it on your poster to make sure that it visually makes sense compared with everything else, because it all has to work together as a single unit. These are good starting points, though, right? These are good places to start, and you can adjust as needed. Hopefully you're adjusting to bigger text if possible, not smaller text, because we want to avoid making things small, especially when it comes to text. Be careful with colors. Good colors, good design is nice, but if you have a lot of colors, then it becomes overwhelming. So we're not, it's not a rave, right? It's a poster session. So don't need to have rainbows on. I guess if you're studying rainbows, perhaps you could have rainbows on there, but otherwise probably not necessary. Probably better to pick a theme of a few colors and stick to that theme. And as we mentioned too, make sure that we are keeping our text high contrast so that it's easy to see. We've already talked about the way that people like to read. Data is very important. So it's not necessarily going to be the same as you would present it in a paper. You definitely want to keep in mind that having backgrounds on your data are going to be harder to see, especially from farther away. So having clean backgrounds, right? Again, the the uh, the bar is lower than if you're presenting paper, presenting data in a paper. So, you can get away with things like not showing the every single point. It's necessarily going to be a deal breaker on a poster. Because if you were submitting a paper for publication, you might actually want to include all of those data points. This does a great job of clearly illustrating the relationship between these, two things without having to give every single data point. The legend over here is taking up space. So, not to say you shouldn't use a legend if the data presentation requires it, if it's complicated enough to warrant one. But if you can get away without it and put that information in the plot directly, that'll save you some space and allow you to make that plot even bigger, which is a good thing. That's kind of what we're going for. So as much junk as possible that you can get rid of, um, keep it out of there. Keep your plot simple. This is also high contrast, right? With the white background and the text and the figures, as opposed to this, which is harder to see because of the gray background. Um, yeah, labeling, I already talked about that. Labeling your data directly versus using legend. All right. Creating your poster. Yeah, so this is a 10-week program. It's hard to imagine that every single person in this room will be at a natural, ending point. Research doesn't work that way, right? You can't just say you're done in 10 weeks no matter what. I mean, you are done in 10 weeks no matter what, but it's very much okay to present what you have and state that here are the future directions. Talk to the people in your lab. Chances are somebody will already have a template that you can use as a starting point. Posters are typically made in PowerPoint as a big giant PowerPoint slide. So somebody in your lab probably already has a PowerPoint template. Definitely should be 36 inches by 48 inches, with 48 inches again being the width, 36 being the height. And then, well, I mean, you do you. I can't, I guess, tell you whether to procrastinate or not, even though it does say don't procrastinate. We'll talk about submitting your poster here in just a second. Have somebody go over it. Some labs like to go through the posters in their lab meetings, and that way everybody can look at it, provide feedback on it. At the very least, find at least one or two people that you know and trust in your lab to have them take a look at it, because we all have our biases, we all have our blind spots. So what looks good and obvious to me may not look good and obvious to you. It's important to get the feedback from other people before presenting that poster. And then, yeah, this one is nice, identifying our audience for you all, because you're here. Your audience is here in the same room with you. It's other people doing research. Now, they may not all be doing research in the same department as you. So while some people will know more about your particular field, there are other people who may not know much about your field at all. That's an important thing to keep in mind. You definitely want to be inviting to people, be able to answer questions or walk them through your poster. But you also want to be brief. Nobody's going to want to stand there for half an hour. Well, that's not necessarily true. If somebody's really interested, maybe they do want to stand there for half an hour. But actually, at that point, I would recommend, hey, here's my email address. Shoot me an email. We can have a FaceTime or whatever and talk about this, you and me, if we want to. Your goal while you're there at the poster session is to hopefully hit as many people as possible, convince them that your research is awesome. So please try not to spend too much time focusing in on one person, even if they are extremely enthusiastic. Exchange contact info and talk to them later. If you need to, keep your general spiel pretty short. Keep it within a few minutes so that you can get through as many people as you possibly can. And don't go into every detail. Again, they will ask you questions if they want to know more details. This one is a little tricky. By saying keeping it conversational, there's a fine line between practicing and knowing what you're going to say, and then practicing too much and sounding like a robot, right? It's tricky. It's a hard thing to get right. This is something that I've had to work on over my career as well. So, I like to have general points ready to go, locked and loaded. but I don't like to necessarily have entire paragraphs of stuff that I'm ready to spew off to people. That's kind of how I've been presenting this, right? I have my general points in my brain that I know I want to talk about, but I also kind of go off script sometimes and say things off the cuff because it feels more natural, feels more conversational. Tell a story. That's ultimately what you're there to do. Tell your story from beginning, middle, and end. As far as some more concrete logistics, the poster session is on Friday, July 30th, over in the Whitaker Atrium. The way that it works, the time is 2 to 4 p.m. So it's 2 at 2 o'clock. The first half is going to present, and the other half is going to judge, and then we switch. We flip flop. So for the second hour, the judges become the presenters, and the presenters become the judges. You'll all be assigned posters that you're going to be asked to visit and judge. In the past, it's usually 2 to 3 posters that you'll be assigned over that hour-long period to judge. And then there are awards. There are prizes. There'll be an awards ceremony starting at 4 o'clock in the lecture hall there, where we hand out prizes for best poster and runner-ups as well. We need to get your posters with enough time to present. Actually, is July 30th a Friday or is it a Thursday? Yeah, that's my bad. Sorry about that. I realized that when I was looking at these two dates. It's Thursday, July 30th, not Friday, July 30th. I apologize for that. Actually, I can change that right now, can't I? Thursday. I thought that seemed off. Okay. Oh, shoot. I didn't mean to go all the way back to the beginning. We do need to get these posters printed ahead of time, obviously, so that they're ready in time for the poster presentation section. So we are asking that you have your poster information sent to the program director by Monday of that week, which is the 27th. Your program coordinators are going to be reaching out to you about this anyway, so you'll get emails and there'll probably be reminders on Teams and stuff about this too. But the way that printing is going to work, we actually have a printing facility in the School of Engineering, but it's in kind of a transitionary state right now. So we're offloading it this summer to the Sandfox School of Art and Architecture. The way that it's going to work, you're going to have to show up with a copy of your poster sometime between the 27th or the 28th and the 30th to print your poster. The printing lab is in the basement of the Kemper Art Museum. The hours you can see up there on the screen, and they also have technicians available in the lab to help you out with the process. So it's not like you just show up and have to figure out how to do it all by yourself. There will be people there to help you. You just have to make sure to bring a copy of your poster, and they'll walk you through the process on how to actually get it printed out. This information, again, will all be sent to you by your program coordinators. They'll be reaching out to you, maybe not this week, but certainly next week. They'll be reaching out to you to say, hey, don't forget to send me your information. They're going to need to know your title and other things like that ahead of time so that the people at the printer know how many of you are coming and how many posters are going to be printed. They want to know that information ahead of time. But if you have any questions in the meantime, you're of course welcome to, you should probably reach out to your program coordinator directly if you have specific questions about your program. But if you have any general questions about creating or presenting posters, that's all I have for you. So I'd be happy to take those questions right now. Does anybody have any questions for me? Yeah.
In your mid-conversation,
Mhm.
but somebody else joins.
Yep.
How
Yeah, so that's a tough one. It's a great question. It's also a tough one to deal with. In my personal experience, I just keep going, and I assume that whoever walked in halfway is going to kind of realize that they walked in halfway and will catch up or, ask questions. Maybe they'll ask questions that I already talked about before they get there, but that's what I'm there for. So that's not necessarily a bad thing. But it's a tough balancing act, and that can honestly change, right? If I'm talking to one person and one other person shows up, I might not really change my rhythm or flow. But if I'm talking to one person, 3 more show up. Well, okay, now I'm kind of trying to think about the group as a whole. I might actually consider backtracking a little bit to get everybody up to speed and then moving on. There's unfortunately not necessarily one right answer. Um, it's a tough thing to balance. Yeah, you're just gonna kind of have to feel it out. Yep. More practice will help with that, though. That's kind of the point of doing this, right? Getting you some practice, putting you in those situations, so that you kind of learn how to handle it. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes.
I see the message. The printing service is about only before July 23rd. Is that true?
That's probably
Yeah,
Yeah.
so the instructions that he had up there, we've sort of changed. We're planning to print with engineering, so that's the information that I posted in the Teamster before. But that has changed, so the 27th, that Monday will be the new deadline for compliance.
Yeah, we wanted to get you as much time as possible. We weren't really happy with the 23rd, so that's why we found another way to get printing done to give you as much time as possible. Yes, I agree. That's 2 weeks from today, right? 2 weeks from today. Any other questions? All right, not seeing any. Thank you for being such a wonderful audience and paying attention today. If you have any other questions, I'll stick around for a few minutes. But otherwise, I hope you have a good rest of your day, and I will see you in the Whitaker Atrium in a few weeks from now and see all your wonderful posters. Thanks.